we have to be able to sit at a table with each other and air our grievances or share our experiences, and if you want change, you got to be part of the solution.
Hi, I'm Officer Knutsen with the Bellingham Police Department. As an outreach officer, I have the chance to meet and talk with a wide range of citizens throughout the city. I'm constantly reminded of how important it is that we have solid communication between our department and the community we serve. But in the midst of a pandemic, when all my normal opportunities to engage with citizens are put on hold, yet there's still issues that need to be addressed, what exactly does outreach look like? I knew from personal experience that whenever I took someone on a ride-along or they got to see behind the scenes of the department, those people always walked away from that experience with a different perspective. So I decided to buy a couple cheap microphones, start bringing my camera from home, and I set out to capture a side of the Bellingham Police Department that the public seldom gets to see. At this point, I don't know how many videos we'll be putting out or if the project will even continue after social distancing relaxes. What I do know is that there's issues that need to be addressed now and discussions that need to be had, so we'll move forward accordingly. My hope is that this project can encourage dialogue about topics that impact our community. Conversation seems rare these days, but I really hope it's something we can get back to. In this first episode, I sat down with Deputy Chief Simon to talk about race, policing, and defunding the police. Deputy Chief Simon was my first sergeant when I started at BPD 20 years ago. I learned a lot from her back then, and I couldn't think of anybody better to sit down with and talk about these tough issues. I hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I enjoyed getting to hear her perspective. Deputy Chief Flo Simon, thank you for joining us today, sitting down and talking with me. I appreciate your time.
I appreciate you having me.
First off, never in my 20-year career has there been a time when I feel like it's more difficult to get it right and say the right things that need to be said. So I'm sure that whatever we say, some people will be thinking there's something missing, or some people won't be happy with what we did say, but I hope to just be able to have a genuine conversation and be able to cover some of these topics, but it's a difficult time to get it right. Would you agree?
I would totally agree with you, and I appreciate that.
Before we jump into kind of some of the bigger topics, can you tell me how you got into policing and what got you to today?
To where I am today?
Yeah.
Well, so I went to Western. I was a business major, and I'd had interactions with the police when I was in college and even growing up. And here in Bellingham, my interactions with the police, I always thought, wow, they were never positive. Two out of the three times they weren't positive. And I saw an ad in the paper that said, do you want a career in law enforcement? I thought to myself, what a way I can make a difference for my community other than getting involved with the police department. So I decided to test with the police department. Unbeknownst to me, back in 1989, when I got hired, I was the second black person that the police department had hired.
Ever.
The first one had been run out by some of the officers that were here. And so they were really trying to make a culture change. And I remember my first week of work, I went to City Hall with the chief of police, and there was a black lady there, and the chief said, this lady is your guardian angel. She is here for support. Anything you need in the police department, in the city, you have any issues, this lady will help you through it. And I thought, wow, I get my very own guardian angel. So fast forward 5 years into the police department, and I've made good friends with people, and we're sitting around one day drinking coffee, and I said to them, so who was your guardian angel when you got hired? And they looked at me like, what are you talking about? And so I told them the whole story, and they're like, oh yeah, we didn't get any of that. At that moment, I realized that chief was trying to make a difference in the police department. And so I've been here almost 32 years.
Wow.
And I've held pretty much every rank. It's been quite the career, but a lot has changed in those 31 years.
Between the job and the culture, what have you seen during that time as far as changes?
Well, the culture has certainly changed, and I think the chief is the gatekeeper of that culture. But it's always been a culture of being inclusive and trying to, just like our mission says, committed to community. I think that culture has never changed. We've become more diverse force for sure, but we've always been ethical, moral, professional organization, and I don't think that's ever changed. The job itself has changed. Mostly now, I think the patrol officers will tell you they're dealing with mental health issues, homelessness issues, addiction issues. When I came on 31 years ago, if I saw 1 or 2 homeless people in a week, that would be a lot, right?
Yeah.
So that has changed the way we do business, really.
You said that when you first got here, there was one other black officer, and they were kind of run out of the department.
Right. He was already gone by the time I got here.
That's kind of a big deal.
Yes, huge deal. I
Yeah.
think he lasted maybe 3 years, 2 or 3 years.
Do you think that that was reflective of the community as a whole, and officers are a cross-section of the community?
Oh, for sure. For sure.
Because that was a different time.
Well, totally. And when I got hired, how many times did we get called because there was a black person in the neighborhood?
Right.
And it only took, it didn't even take a year of me being here where I heard a sergeant get on the air and say, we're not going to those.
Right.
Right? What are they doing, Bellingham? Are they creating a crime
Right.
or committing a crime? So, yeah, that was, back then, that was the
Right.
way the community was.
I read an article that a friend of mine, great guy, I don't think he was trying to bag on cops at all, but he shared an article that, according to his post, he was trying to kind of shed some light on why there's so much disconnect between the public and police right now. It pointed out all sorts of discrepancies in how much police think that there is racism versus what the public perceives. And then it did allude to the fact that according to 8,000 officers that were surveyed, a lot of officers still contend that it's behavior-based instead of race-based.
Right.
And I read that and I thought, well, yes, if you do this job long enough, you start to see like it's not your skin color, it's your behavior.
Right.
And I mean, I'm sure there's people that are going to watch this and think, no, he's just saying that because he's on camera. But that is what motivates us, is behavior.
Well, that's what we're trained to look at, is
Yeah.
behavior, right? Like when I was first on, my first 3 years, if I stopped somebody who had a cracked windshield, was their license valid or suspended?
Probably suspended.
Suspended 99% of the time.
Right.
I knew they were suspended. I mean,
Right.
that was the behavior. If you don't take care of your stuff, then you probably don't take care of your license, you probably don't take care of your tabs, and I would make those traffic stops. And so it's the same thing when you see somebody that's exhibiting behaviors that you know are suspicious,
Right.
then you're going to make a contact.
And I almost feel like there might be a discrepancy between when you poll the regular population on how prevalent is racism versus police. Again, people are thinking I'm just trying to stick up for police, but I think that police officers of all people, at least in the Northwest, at least in Bellingham, and that's right, I mean, that's what we have to talk about is Bellingham. I think we of all people understand that race has nothing to do with behavior.
Right, right. And I also think that, you know what, people don't get into law enforcement. The badge doesn't make you racist. You're either racist when you come in,
Right.
or I don't know. The badge doesn't make you that way. So I haven't seen racism here.
Right.
We always want to say it's racism whenever a black person is stopped for something. Could it be their behavior? Just because you're white and you stop a black person
Right.
that's committing a crime doesn't make you racist. And so when the fight is on and something happens, you know, we want to scream racism, but it's not. It's behaviors, and it's hard to explain that to people without them getting very defensive. So it's a difficult topic for sure.
But I think what people don't understand is that a lot of the people we work with, I mean, why did you get into policing?
To help people.
To help people make a difference. I mean, it's such a canned answer, right?
I know, but it's the truth, right?
Day one of the academy, stand up, what's your name? Why'd you get into policing? I want to help people.
Right.
It sounded so cheesy, but you're like, oh, I'm not the only one.
Right.
So if you line up, 110 of our officers, why'd you get into policing? Overwhelmingly, that's going to be the desires. I wanted to make an impact in my community. Great. Now you got to go through a polygraph. What'd you do in the past that won't, get you a job here?
Right.
You have a psych. They talk to your teachers. They talk to how have you treated
Right.
people? So now you put 110 of those people who wanted to help people and could jump through the hoops based on their previous behavior of how they treated people, and then the population, or at least some people locally, are like, now admit that you guys are a bunch of racists.
You're right.
That is a hard pill to swallow.
It's
really hard. And if you ask most officers, everyone at some point has had that time where they thought, man, that could have been my last day
Yeah.
on this earth. And it's serving people of all colors.
Right.
And so when you have people changing their profile picture and hashtagging something, or going to a protest one time, then accusing us of not caring about people, I think that's probably why morale has taken a hit. Would you
Right.
say?
Oh, totally. Because this is probably one of the most caring bunch of people that I know, and to hear a small fragment of the community saying negative things about you is hard to take. Granted, it's a small minority, but that's what we focus on. We want to be perfect, and so the negative hits hurt.
I think most officers here would agree we're all for doing the job better.
Right.
And obviously there's a lot of pain in this country. There's a lot of communities that feel abandoned and disenchanted. The clash between police, the crime, everything points to that. I hear when the black community says, yes, but as soon as you stand up for the police, we feel like you're minimizing our struggle. And I don't think any of us want to see that, but there has to be that balance of approaching the whole issue with conversation and actually a desire to understand what's going on.
Right, and I'm not trying to minimize your struggle. I'm trying to tell you about your police department. I recognize the systemic injustices that have been done. I understand the loophole in the 13th Amendment that's got this all rolling, right? I get that. But let's focus on Bellingham and how your police department is. And yes, we will listen to your grievances, but there's a balance there. And the other thing is, people have to be willing to listen and meet us halfway and work on a solution if they think there's a problem. If you're just going to shout over me and yell over me, we're never going to get anywhere. Let's have some dialogue, which we have started to do in the last couple of weeks with a couple of different groups. So get to know us is what I want to tell people. And a lot of people don't want to hear that.
I have found myself trying to stay away from social media now. And call people, who I know are going through struggles and actually have some real conversations, which is what the driving force of this conversation was. There's so little substance that gets talked about. Anyways, hopefully we can start that conversation.
Yes.
Defunding the police, hashtags, it's all spray painted everywhere. What do you think about when you hear defund the police?
Well, the defund is a harsh word, and I think what people are wanting to say is take funds that are given to the police and put them in the social services, give them to the mental health people, give them to the homelessness advocates and service groups. Unfortunately, we are not funded for those things. So the first thing that would get defunded is training, which your community wants us to have. Where you want the best trained officers. Well, that costs money, and the reason we have such a great department is because of all the training that we go through. By far, I think if you average the state, we are in the top of as far as training. So, yes, defunding the police sounds great, but in actuality, all you're doing is cutting training, and so that's not going to help the problem. And not only that, but we are 24/7. So in a crisis situation, somebody's having a mental breakdown. Who's the default call? The police department. So you have to invest in training in those things.
I've heard people talk about San Francisco would be one example of police aren't going to go to civil issues. They're not going to go to homeless calls, mental health, which I don't know an officer here that would say, no, I don't agree with that. That would be fantastic. But the kicker is we get called from mental health providers who need assistance contacting volatile people. We get asked to help us, contact somebody on the street who's known to be volatile. So I just don't necessarily see how you can just disconnect that right off the bat.
Yeah, you can't. That would take a long time. You'd have to have specially trained people out there that have all the training that we have, not just the de-escalation and all that, but also to be able to defend themselves if they're attacked. It's getting people to understand that. They think that just because you wear a uniform and have a gun and a badge, you escalate the situation. Not all the time. Sometimes we're successful at de-escalating.
So in 2019, we responded to just over 71,000 calls. And in 0.26% of those cases, we used some type of force, which would even be just grabbing your hand, hey, you're under arrest. That's pretty low. Like, we de-escalate all the time. And especially the people that we deal with in mental crisis. I didn't realize when I became a new officer how much being a counselor was going to be my job description.
We went from a nation that had 600,000 hospital beds for the mentally ill to one that has just over 60,000. So what are you going to do with all those people? Guess who gets to deal with them? Us. And now this has been going on for, I don't know, probably since you've been hired, right? At least 15 years. And the problem's just getting to a point where it's exploding.
So I understand the sentiment of defund the police. I just think it's going completely in the wrong direction as far as being able. I think it's impossible to say, we want you to be better, and we want to take all your money. They
don't go together.
This is a conversation I've had with a lot of my friends outside of law enforcement. can we be pro-police right now and pro-people of color?
Oh, sure. I think we are. I mean, I think most of my friends are. We can be both.
I've had people reach out to me by text. They won't dare post on a public,
Sure.
Facebook page. But they reach out to me and say, hey, I feel for what you're going through. I know this is a tough time for everybody. Just hang in there. But I don't want to say anything because I will look like a racist.
Right. There's that sentiment out there.
I don't even in Ferguson, I don't remember people feeling so afraid of being canceled and the outrage over one comment of like, hey, we support good cops.
Well, why wouldn't you want to support good cops? I mean, good cops don't support bad cops. None of us are sitting here applauding what happened to George Floyd.
Right.
It was despicable. All of us agree that I mean, we couldn't even watch. I couldn't even watch it without crying.
It's
I mean,
painful.
It's painful. But 99% of us are not that way, right?
Yeah.
And so, I think you can be pro-police and pro human rights, pro-black.
Yeah. I had a conversation with an old roommate of mine I went to school briefly in St. Louis. I knew he's probably having a tough time as a black male who's felt a lot of these pains that are being voiced right now. And he knew that I'm trying to do the best I can do. And so we had an hour-and-a-half conversation this last weekend just talking about these issues. And one of the things that he reached out to me and said, hey, I want to know about Blue Lives Matter and counter protests and why do we have to talk over each other? And I'm like, that's $1 million question.
Right.
Why do we? He said, well, I should be able to wear a pro-police on one side and Black Lives Matter on one and walk down the street. And, of course, the black community wants good officers. But he said, I don't feel like I could do that right now because people are trying to force each other to choose.
Right. That's just the way our country is, though. I mean, there's so much divisiveness going on all across everything, and it's a weird time.
Yeah.
But how do we change that narrative, right? We have to start the conversation, so I think this is a great way to do it.
Yeah.
But we have to be able to sit at a table with each other and air our grievances or share our experiences, and if you want change, you got to be part of the solution.
Right. Well, thank you for your time. I appreciate the conversation. I think it's a great start to kind of dive into this series and see where it goes. So
yeah, that's
thank you
great.
very much.
Thank you for doing it.